There's a collection of 8 industrially processed and refined high polyunsaturated fatty acid oils that I've grouped together under this umbrella as the hateful 8. It's corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, grapeseed, and rice bran oil. These oils are the worst thing in the food supply, and they actually are the root cause of every known disease.
Wow.
To be good, it has to be unrefined, so it's expensive. When it's refined, it's okay, but it's not very good. The more refined something is, the less healthy it could possibly be. Most of these antioxidant supplements are a complete waste of money. Antioxidants do not work the way the supplement companies tell you that they work. That is complete chemical BS. If you make a habit of picking up everything that has an ingredients list and turning it around and looking for those 3 C's and 3 S's, that will change your life in a positive way.
I love that. Dr. Cate, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on.
Hi, Dr. Lowry. It's an honor to be here with you.
Amazing. So, first off, I have to ask you this because I've wanted to know this ever since hearing about you and meeting you. Is what was it like working with Kobe and some of the players on the Lakers?
It was a headache, but I guess it was a good headache. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun too. The best part was getting to go to the games in the family room back there and seeing all the whole, like, the families of everybody and all their kids, and it was fun, hobnobbing. But the rest of it was interesting because they're like everybody else. They're like regular people. They don't want to be told what you're supposed to eat, and
Right.
ever since they've been probably in sports, people have been saying, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. And some people, are just not interested in that at certain times in their lives. So, for the younger crowd, we got pushed back, and everybody has their own private nutritionist. So working as part of the team was totally different than just being an independent nutritionist that they've chosen you, right? So it's like I
Right.
was being imposed on them. But the guys that took the time, that were interested, in health and nutrition, they loved it. So
Mm.
that was super cool to be appreciated by those
That
stars.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think people see like, oh, cool, you work with some of the best athletes in the world, arguably the best basketball player ever to live, and it's like some of the challenges is not so much, hey, how do we implement? What do we implement? You know that, right? Hey guys, this is what's optimal for your health. It's like, well, this person wants to follow a vegan based diet. This person wants to go this, and this person only eats this. You have to try and work within all those frameworks, and it's super difficult to do.
Yes. But the
Yeah.
one thing they all have in common, segue, segue
Yeah.
music, is don't eat seed oils.
Love
Because
it.
you could be on any diet and not eat seed oils. So, so that was really, actually, for me, that's the most important thing for anyone, athlete or no, but especially athletes, because they're struggling against inflammation. They're pushing their body to the limit. Granted, they have amazing genetics and they have a higher limit than the rest of us. But yeah, so they really notice a difference when they totally
Mm.
avoid the seed oils. Of course, a lot of them didn't know that was even happening, because we
Right.
were feeding them, and they didn't know exactly what was going on, a lot of them, and they just knew that the food tasted fantastic. And the chef there, who was also a fantastic chef, and we could not have done it without her. Shout out to Sandra Padilla, she's still there. She got compliments all the time, about this is the best food that they've had. And I like to say it's not just because she is a super fantastic chef. It's also because she was given permission to be a chef. A lot, right? These days, chefs have to kind of work within the confines of what is a healthy diet according to society. And that tends to mean no animal fats, and
Mm.
tends to mean the nasty, hateful 8 seed oils quite often.
Right. Now, let's talk about the hateful eight. What are they and why are they not beneficial for our health?
Yeah, so there's a collection of 8 industrially processed and refined high polyunsaturated fatty acid oils that I've grouped together under this umbrella as the hateful eight, just so that you can remember there's 8 of them. And it's not like super obvious what they all have in common. That's why I had to do that. So the 8 of them are composed of 3 C's and 3 S's to kind of help you get a
Mm.
little mnemonic going there. It's corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower. And then the other 2 are less important because they're mostly in restaurants. You're not going to see them on labels so often. So you don't have to memorize them as much, but it's grapeseed and rice bran oil. So those are
Mm.
mostly in your sit down restaurants, right? They're not like really in fast food restaurants. They're more expensive. But the 3 C's and the 3 S's, those are going to pop up on pretty much most processed foods and lots of other foods that you don't even think of as being processed necessarily, like canned tuna or mayonnaise or salad dressing. So they're probably in 90% of the things that you buy in the store when you're not shopping from the outer edges where they keep the actual food, the hard to get at actual food.
Right. Now, what are the major issues with these hateful eight?
So these oils are toxic for animals and humans. And that's because they have one key problem, and that is their fatty acid composition. Their fatty acid composition is very high in these types of fatty acids called polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's kind of like the opposite of saturated fatty acids, and it's also not what olive oil is famous for, monounsaturated. And the reason these polyunsaturated fatty acids are a problem in these oils is because of the fact that they are heated, and these particular types of fatty acids cannot handle heat. They
Mm.
deteriorate when they are heated. And they're heated repeatedly during their like lifespan of creation, and then before we eat them. So the whole journey from field to fork for, say, canola oil or soy oil, which is the most common vegetable oil right now, um, involves a lot of heating. So you get heated to 500 or 600 degrees multiple times in the factory during the extraction and during the refining to clean up the mess that extraction creates. And then once it's in the bottle, where it already, by the way, by the time it's out of the factory, it already has toxins in it. And this is measurable. So when, people measure just bottles off the shelf in a store with a special kind of a tool that measures molecules based on like a kind of signature vibrational fingerprint called an NMR spectrometer. They detect a variety of major toxins, including a huge category of toxins called trans fats. As many as 5% of all the fatty acids in there, the whole bottle, uh, are are these unnatural trans fats that have some toxic effects. Um, but that's just getting started. So there's that bottle, and it has been refined and heated many times, and has these trans fats in it. And then you leave it on the shelf in your house. Once you open it, or if you just expose it to light, more toxins start forming because of these problematic polyunsaturated fatty acids. They're just very, very unstable, and they react with light. They get damaged by UV light. They get damaged by oxygen in the air once you open the bottle. And then they get damaged really quickly when you start cooking with them because the heat accelerates all kinds of reactions. So whether you're cooking with it, or Keebler is cooking with it, or whoever makes Chips Olay or whatever, Lay's potato chips, that's what I'm trying to think of, that company, whoever's cooking with it, there's many more toxins forming during this process.
Mm.
And that's bad. We shouldn't eat food that is full of toxin. And I mean, I guess like, maybe you want to know. So a lot of people ask me like, maybe people don't actually bother asking me. They're just like, yeah, it's toxic. So what? Everything's toxic, right? According to
Mm,
somebody, everything's toxic, right? We've all
sure.
heard this, right? We've heard broccoli has carcinogens. You've probably run
Right.
into that, right?
Yep.
So this is not that like minute sort of footnote of, yeah, maybe kind of thing. These are toxins that you will find in hazmat manuals that people have to wear yellow suits to clean up when they're present in the air and in large enough amounts. These are those very same toxins. They're serious bad toxins, things that have real like nasty chemical names. And one of the most famous ones is well studied, is acrylamide.
Mm,
And acrylamide is in these hazmat manuals, and that's it, because it's toxic. Even when you just inhale it at like something like a part per million in the air, it starts to have toxic effects on people's lungs. And it ends up in the food though too. Like it's in the food when we eat food that's been cooked in these things. That's measurable.
mm,
And people using these same special machines that do that vibrational fingerprint testing, they found that massive amounts of a wide variety of toxins are in, like, say, a French fry from a fast food place, very popular fast food French fries. They didn't tell me the exact company, but they said it's something you've heard of, is where they source their French fries, and they tested them, and they found that the amount of this category of toxins that's as bad for us as what's in cigarette smoke was actually equal. In one cigarette, you get an equal amount of the same category of toxins as you do in one French fry, strangely enough. So
wow.
having he said he calculated that. This one scientist that I've spoken with a number of times, named Martin Grootveld. He's a character. He's British. um, he said that they like calculated that like a 5-ounce serving of fries, which he calls chips because he's British. So it was always confusing. I always had to say, are you talking about potato chips or fries? He says that one, that's kind of like, I think a medium size, has the same amount of this one category of toxin as an entire pack of, as you get from smoking, an entire pack of cigarettes. So,
Wow.
like when you're taking your 6-year-old, your kids out, um, just think about it that way. It's like, hey, would you like to go out and smoke a pack of cigarettes? That's
Right.
basically what you're doing, health wise, right? I mean, I know it's fun and it smells good in there, but you can go somewhere else. You can eat something else. Even at McDonald's, you could try having something other than the fries. Like that's the worst thing there. And there are restaurants around now that there's a few in every major city that use a better cooking fat. For example, beef tallow. There's a few chains now that are starting to use that, and it's better just because it has very low of those very unstable fatty acids. It's mostly saturated fat.
Right. And this is a fascinating topic because it's so prevalent in our society, I think, right? And I think most people aren't just experiencing the even single use canola oil. They're experiencing some of these oils that have been fried and then refried and like constantly inside of these fried things. But so does that make the problem even worse when they're constantly refrying it?
So yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
The surveys on American eating habits show that somewhere around 30% of Americans now eat at a fast food joint once every single day, and that the most common thing that they eat is French fries. And so when it comes to the timing matters and the heat matters, because when it comes to toxin formation, it's like a burn, right? It's time and temperature, right? Like, that
Mm,
the burn is worse if you burn yourself. The hotter the thing is and the longer it's on your skin, the worse it is. Well, it's the same idea with toxin formation in these vegetable oils. So yeah, the worst of the worst are the anything deep fried, any chips that have been, most chips are the same processing. It's called continuous fry method. So they've got like potato slices on a conveyor belt, and then running through just a hot bath of oil that's continually heated and continually running until the oil is considered bad, which is, whatever the law requires, but minimum of, which is like really not very strict. I think it's like you can use it for, by law, for longer than what is actually palatable. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So thank you. Health department. Uh, they're, not really on top of it with this one. They're too busy making sure that, you cook your beef to death, right, in the restaurants, and everything is like well done. Ugh. So the the companies themselves actually have better standards. Like the processed food companies have better standards than these agencies that are in charge of protecting our health in terms of these oils and how long it takes for toxins to develop. So crazy,
So
huh?
if someone's listening to this and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've been eating fast food," is there one a way to measure the amount of toxins that they have, and two, is there a way to kind of like get rid of them? You know?
Yeah. So, well, and why would you want to do that? And so, one of the things, like, what does it matter, right? I'm going to tell you right off the bat that there's no direct way to measure them, and it's not super easy to get off of them. So, I think it's
Mhm.
important to have a conversation about why you might want to go through the trouble of doing those things,
Yep.
and that is because these oils are the worst thing in the food supply, and they actually are the root cause of every known disease that I, as a family medicine doctor, was diagnosing my patients with and treating them for. They're a contributing cause. They're not the only thing, but they are the most powerful contributing cause to everything. So I'm talking about weight gain because they make you tired and hungry all the time. I'm talking even about diabetes because they change your metabolism so that your cells don't want to burn your body fat, and your body retools its entire glucose production scheme to raise your blood sugar. So they give you diabetes. They give you this precursor to type 2 diabetes called insulin resistance. So, and insulin resistance is, even regular medical doctors recognize that that is a root cause of many conditions related, serious conditions, chronic
Sure.
problems, serious chronic problems like Alzheimer's and cancer and autoimmune disorders. So these things in our bodies uh, are a setup for developing one form of chronic disease or another. And which exact problem you're going to get depends maybe on your genetics a little bit, and when in your life you're going to get it, whether it's age 12 or age 30, depends also on your genetics and also on your family, uh, your family's exposure to vegetable oils. And it's a kind of a moving target because when I was a kid, the amount of vegetable oils in the food supply was something like a quarter of what it is now. So the problem is magnified, and that's made it harder to get off of them.
So are basically these toxins, are they creating so much inflammation, free radicals, that they're destroying mitochondrial function? And so that's probably what's likely leading to some of these complications that we're seeing, insulin resistance and all these other problems, is they're really impairing mitochondrial function. Is that the mechanism that these are working?
Yes, so that is a byproduct of the mechanism. So the mechanism itself is called as a chemical mechanism. When I think of mechanism, that's what I think of as the chemical thing. And so the chemical process is oxidative stress. So they promote
Sure.
oxidative stress. And yes, oxidative stress is exactly what you said. It is the thing that damages our mitochondria, but it also damages everything else in our cells once it gets going. But the mitochondria are kind of the canary in the coal mine for oxidative stress because they use oxygen, right? That's mitochondria, the reason that we breathe, right? Like the mitochondria burn our fat, they burn body fat, they burn sugar, they use oxygen to give us our cellular ATP energy. And that means they're the most, because oxygen and PUFA just are problems, that's a problematic mixture there. You have too much PUFA in your diet, you get too much in your body fat, that means your mitochondria are always exposed to more oxidative stress. So it's very often that the canary in the coal mine is when pathologists are trying to figure out what is the cause of this disease, where is it starting, they see abnormalities in people's mitochondria. But your
Mm.
mitochondria give you energy. So if they are not able to give you energy, your body just desperately has to use some other fuel. And
Right.
that's why they logically just, your cells turn to sugar. And that's where the whole reason I wrote my book, The Fat Burn Fix, is because I realized that this is the root cause of insulin resistance. It's these seed oils and how they change our metabolism. And that was, basically my original research. And I put it in a book because I'm not affiliated with the university like you are. And I assume you are. That's how you can't publish anything in an academic paper if you're not with the university. So I had to put it out in a book
Mm.
because I'm not affiliated with the university. But like that, I think is really fundamentally important for like everyone to understand. And it would be great if doctors would open their eyes to this, or health practitioners and dietitians, because right now doctors and dietitians are kind of recommending these oils, right? A little bit less in the past 5 years because people have been waking up to all this stuff. But they're still like not getting that they are really truly toxic, and they're the reason that we develop heart attacks too, not cholesterol and saturated fat like doctors learn. And the whole thing is just messed up. The medical system is very messed up, and it centers entirely on these seed oils because that's where it started in 1948.
And is that through the same mechanism, these heart attacks? Is it through a very like you were talking about earlier with the diabetes?
Yeah, it's the oxidative stress. And this
Yeah.
time what's getting oxidized isn't just the mitochondria, it's the fat carrying particles called lipoproteins, the
Hmm.
LDL and HDL that your doctor actually tests for. But your doctor thinks that all LDL cholesterol is bad cholesterol, but it's not. It's actually not bad at all. It's good. When it's oxidized, it's bad. And
Mm.
HDL can be bad too once it's oxidized. So when we're talking about a healthy diet, all cholesterol is good. And we're talking about seed oils in your diet, none of it's good.
So I wanna put on a different hat, and I'm going to come at it from a standpoint of someone who's defending seed oils, because these are arguments that we hear. There was a recent meta-analysis published in 2022 talking about comparing canola oil to olive oil consumption on these lipid profiles, and they found that that canola oil had beneficial effects on LDL, total cholesterol, LDL to HDL cholesterol, compared to olive oil, something that we would otherwise recommend is like, oh, this is better. What would you say if they're using that as the argument that, hey, these studies show that canola oil actually has beneficial impacts on lipid profiles?
Yeah, so without having the benefit of knowing exactly which study that is and exactly how they did the study, I would say, first of all, there's a red flag because that's asking us to suspend the laws of physics, right? Because what I was describing about oxidation of polyunsaturated fatty acid, That's chemistry.
Mm.
And chemistry, that level of chemistry comes down to physics, right? It's driven by thermodynamics, which anybody who's taken physics, they know that those are rules that you can't break. And so, okay, suddenly canola oil is the thing that our bodies need, this thing that didn't exist and goes against everything that people used to do and used to eat. Suddenly that's the thing. I mean, come on. Like, just the suspension of, you have to suspend many levels of reality there. And I'm sure that, if I were to take a look at it, I would find these errors. One, if it's a meta-analysis, very often they cite articles that do not actually use the endpoint that they're talking about, right? But people don't go through the trouble of looking at the article and seeing that, wait, they're not talking about, oh, it improved insulin resistance, or, oh, it improved whatever marker of LDL function they were talking about in the one you're referring to. It was similar, but it wasn't that. It wasn't what they said. So they fudge it by hiding behind these meta-analyses that, like, no one bothers to look up. So that's one very, very, very common trick. And another one is that I find, because I've looked these up for, different things, like similar meta-analysis showed, like in 2016, I'm trying to remember what it was. It showed, oh yeah, that like saturated fat was better for
Mm.
heart disease. And it was just full of little errors and, inconsistencies that add up to one big fat lie. And another example is, oh yeah, just having what happens very often with these seed oil studies is that they're doing the study in populations where um, that population eats less seed oil than we do here in America.
Mm.
And so they give them, these differing amounts of things, and they give it for a very short time, say 12 weeks or something. And then they just look for whatever they find as a change. And then they say, okay, well, let's see how we can make this change a good thing. And that's what they do, right? It's just fabricated. And I've seen this coming out of the same institution, out of Tufts. There's a particular doctor, Dariush Mozaffarian, who is involved with all of these big meta-analyses that shows that canola oil is great and vegetable oil is great. And oh yeah, guess what? Tufts gets money from Unilever that make all these vegetable oils. They depend on all this
Mm.
money. And Tufts University and Dariush Mozaffarian, these same people that are, doing all these studies that are basically big fat lies. When you dig through the pile of garbage that they have created, to get to the bottom of where, are they really citing this correctly? 9 times out of 10, they're not. But anyway, so Tufts, Dariush Mozaffarian, they created this new food compass. You
Oh,
probably
I've
talked about
seen
that,
that.
right?
Yep.
It comes from Tufts, and they put, you've probably seen these ridiculous things. I think they put like Reese's Pieces as healthier than a steak,
It's crazy.
I
Crazy.
mean, come on. Why
Right.
are we listening to anything they say?
Right.
Just
I
stop.
agree. I agree. And I think if I were to turn my head back around and look at like, hey, these are probably some of the flaws of it. With meta-analyses, a lot of it, like you said, garbage in equals garbage out, I often see. So a lot of these studies, what they'll do is they'll send out surveys and go, hey, how much canola oil are you consuming? How much olive oil are you consuming? And then look at people's changes in lipid. And that's not really an indication of, is it the canola oil that's driving that response? Or is it just, oh, they also happen to be eating some other healthier things that's driving these effects? That's number one. Number two is, I don't think they looked at these oxidized particles. They're
They
just
can't
looking at total cholesterol and kind of
easily.
broad markers.
Well,
So
I mean, we don't have a test for oxidized cholesterol. We have an indirect test,
right.
um, that the laboratory will call this oxidized cholesterol, but it's actually an antibody test, and it doesn't guarantee it's testing a protein. So it
Mm.
doesn't guarantee, it's not indirect. So it's not very good. And another thing about those surveys that you mentioned is that they don't actually even ask people how much soy oil or canola oil are you
Mm.
doing, because people don't know. They don't have a clue. They just ask, what do you eat?
Yep.
Right? They ask what you eat. Well, guess what? If you eat fried chicken from one restaurant versus the other, it's going to have a radically different fat. So it's basically all bets are off there. You can turn that survey into whatever you want, because here's how they do that. They translate the food value into basically a seed oil value, right? Like they get that the
Mm.
data isn't seed oils. The data is, what did you eat? And then
Mhm.
they can create like, okay, so this equals this much seed oil. They can make that up.
Sure.
And
Sure.
they do, because there's no set, right? Like they can't use the USDA because they didn't ask exactly where did you get your fried chicken, or or what kind of chips do you use, or is your salad dressing made with olive oil or not? Like they don't ask those questions,
Right.
and so they just can't assess that. So there's just a huge black box of missing information that they can use to sway things just enough to nudge it so that it just becomes a significant change.
Right. And then second one that I've heard a lot of, I'm putting the hat back on and saying, hey, but what about this? A lot of Asian populations consume a high amount of sesame oil. And so people look at sesame oil and go, oh, Japan, China, they're healthier than we are in the US. They consume a lot of sesame oil. What would be your counter to that?
Yeah, so they consume now more soy oil than sesame oil. Okay. They did not traditionally consume soy oil. So if you ever hear that, that is not true. They
Mm.
used soy products, but they didn't extract the oil. They didn't have any refining technique. That was impossible to do
Right.
until the 1940s. So they don't eat, the amount there of sesame oil was small always, because if you ever look at a cooking show where it's filmed in Asia, there's lard left and right. That was their traditional fat. I mean, if you've ever been to an Asian community, what's running around on the streets as pigs?
Mhm.
They use tons of lard in their traditional food. But now they use more soy oil than ever. And I just heard a statistic recently that the rate of diabetes or prediabetes in China now is something like 50%, 50. So they
Wow.
are no longer healthier than we are, period. End of
Wow.
story.
That's crazy. And is sesame oil? That's not on the Hateful Eight, right?
No.
And what's the reason? Is it what's unique about that oil compared to the others?
Well, so this is where it helps to understand chemistry. So like I just kind of uh, thought through the process. And first of all, it is a traditional oil.
Mm.
And so that means that it has been bred for many thousands of years to yield its oil. And in fact, it does more easily. You can just put it in a wedge press, a simple primitive press to extract the oil by pounding on a piece of wood that puts pressure on this wedge shaped thing and oil drips out. You cannot do that with corn. You can't do that with cottonseed. You can't do that with safflower. So,
Right.
so like that's one level of it. And then the other level of it is that it was that it has all these, because of that, it has so many antioxidants in there that it is protected from oxidation. But
Got
that wedge press is a totally different thing than the heat that I was describing with the factory, because when you do that to, like, if you could ruin sesame oil, right? If you ran it through the factory in the same process, but you don't have to extract sesame oil. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is those antioxidants which protect it. And then the final aspect is that it was never used for deep frying.
Hmm.
It's too expensive.
That makes sense. One of the other points that I wanted to get your insight on is a lot of the studies that I've seen, at least, that suggest heart health benefits to using canola oil. They're using less refined canola oils or unheated canola oils? Do you think that could be the drivers? A lot of these are not heated, so they're not necessarily going through some of these same changes and releasing as many toxins as you were saying.
Yeah. So the um, there's two questions there. One is, does it really matter that they're heated? And yes, it absolutely matters. But two, it's about the quantity and the sheer quantity. So we
Sure.
have several human studies from the 50s and 60s that show that unheated oils, just in vast quantities, cause all these same problems that heated oils in smaller quantities do. So, it brings on the problems. It takes 5 years instead of 1 or 2. We
Mhm.
live for 80. So either way, it's a problem.
Big time. And now, is there a way to counter that? So, for example, one of the things I've heard before is, can you counter this by bumping up your omega 3 profile? Like right now, I think the ratio in most people right now, I think is 15 to 1 omega 6 to omega 3, which is way on the side of like probably not healthy and beneficial. Can you counter this by bumping up your omega 3 intake?
If you were to do that, you would make your health worse, right?
Hmm.
So, like, let's say right now you have been eating a standard American diet, and all of a sudden you want to, start having more omega 3. Well, omega 3 fatty acids actually oxidize faster than linoleic acid.
Hmm.
And so this is one thing about the whole seed oil conversation that should have been put to rest about 30 years ago, right? This idea about the ratio first came out in the 1990s with an omega diet. It was a very popular book called The Omega Diet. And it was based on the idea of this ratio, right? That at the time, like our diets, because we don't eat olive oil, we eat soy oils that have a different ratio. Um, the researcher Artemis Simopoulos at the National Institute of Health was saying that this could be a problem. I think it could be a problem, and I think we should look into it. And they looked into it, and it's not a big problem. So, but that it was a popular book, a lot of people read it, and it led to other popular books. It led to a whole thing about the paleo diet talking about that. But that's not the issue. The issue is oxidative stress. It's not this ratio balance, right? Like, if it were up to us to like manage our ratios of omega 3 versus omega 6, if that mattered a whole heck of a lot, I just don't think we would have made it this far, because it shouldn't be that easy to mess up your diet. You have to know this minute thing about some chemistry thing. And
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that's kind of a red flag for me. But I have this principle that nature likes to make things simple, and health, pretty foolproof. It should be hard to mess up. If it's a real dietary rule, real rules don't break easy.
Hmm.
And so that's easy to break. So it can't be a real rule. And like I said, it's been tested. They did do tests where they didn't have a whole ton of PUFA, and they had a significant more omega 6 to omega 3 ratio, and they looked for bad things, and there weren't bad things. And that's because the body regulates uh, inflammation. And yes, it's probably not, I mean, this is kind of a nerdy thing, but it's probably not ideal to have that ratio. But in terms of causing major serious outcomes, it's like a tiny sprinkle on on a huge layer cake of bad that is the seed oils.
Got it. Now, some people will make the argument that it isn't the seed oils, but rather the foods that the seed oils are highly prevalent in, like these processed carbohydrates. Um, do you see seed oils being used mainly in these like refined carbohydrates where that's more of the problem, or are people using it like on the pan, like cooking? more so and then cooking their meat in it. And now we have a little bit more of a problem or
Oh
something.
yeah, oh, absolutely, all the time. In fact, I speak with people who are like, "Oh my God, I consider myself a health nut. I consider myself educated. I wasn't eating junk food, but I just didn't know about these oils. And so now that I've cut them out, I lost weight. I can concentrate better. I feel better. And then when they show me their labs, I see that their biomarkers like the HDL cholesterol and their triglycerides have all moved in the right direction. They were mildly insulin resistant. Now they're not. It's just, yes, it's a problem. And yeah, the carbohydrates, the carbohydrates are a problem for a whole different reason. Um, and that more has to do with empty calories,
Right.
right? Like, obviously sugar is sheer empty calories. Um,
Right.
and even potatoes are relatively, rice, there's not a lot of nutrition there. So you're getting calories that don't have nutrition. That's the main problem with them
Yeah.
until we develop diabetes. Now, then when we develop diabetes, you have to avoid those things because your body can no longer um, manage the blood sugar naturally,
Right.
right? So,
Now,
but
are you seeing this in people? Because some would say, well, of course they're seeing benefits to weight loss and diabetes because they're probably not snacking on chips and crackers and all these things that have a high prevalence of vegetable oils in them. Is it the vegetable oil, or are they pulling out the foods that they were probably snacking on that probably caused them to overeat and have these problems? Or have you seen it in people who are just like, hey, I've eaten healthier, but I just switched out the oil that I'm cooking with?
yes, it's those specifically like the large group of people that reach out to me who are what they consider themselves health nuts. And
Mhm.
they say that, they don't eat candy, they don't eat junk food.
Right.
And, they've always respected their body and have like made every effort to do what is the right thing. And, they would go to fancy restaurants and trust that the fancy restaurant is the sauce on their, salmon or whatever they thought was healthy. Was a healthy sauce was made with some actual real ingredients, but generally that's going to be made out of seed oils. You can go to a fancy sit down restaurant and blow $100 on, 30% of your calories coming from seed oils because the meat will be marinated and cooked in seed oil based, sauces and drizzled with sauces. The salad dressing, more sauces. The dessert, whatever it is going to have the seed oils in it because it's cheaper to use that instead of actual butter. So I've done that. I went to a super fancy restaurant, pretty fancy in Napa Valley, and said, "Hey, is there anything on the menu here that I can get that won't have canola in it?" And she went back and came back and said to me after talking to the chef, she said, "No,
Wow.
yeah."
Now, do you carry, I know Ben carries a card around with him and like hands it to the waiters and waitresses like, "Hey, I'm allergic to these." How do you navigate that world when you're out eating?
Well, I don't go out to eat a lot just because
Okay.
of where I live. We don't have a lot of good restaurants, honestly. I mean, if they're cooking with seed oils, they're not a good chef. That's what I learned when I lived in Napa. But what I tell people to do is I say, here's your script. Just if you're going to a restaurant, it's a sit down restaurant, then where they actually have servers, you got to tell them this. Just say, I want my food cooked in butter or 100% olive oil. Do you have anything that can you accommodate that? And then it's, simpler, right? Because
Um,
then they don't have to go through the list and look at this and that, and they're just going to come back and say whatever they feel like. If,
right, right. Now, someone who has been eating this way, how long, people are going to want to know, like, how long are these staying inside of my body? How do I detox from these seed
Yeah.
oils? Say I'm like, I've been eating a lot of them. How would I get rid of a lot of that damage, so to speak?
Yeah, so you got to stop eating the seed oils. That's step one.
Sure.
And then your body will, detox to the best of its ability. But here's where, like, I needed to write the book, The Fat Burn Fix. Many people who are severely insulin resistant will not burn their own body fat.
Hmm.
And you probably work with too many healthy people to have found this, but people who do these tests where they evaluate, are you burning sugar or are you burning body fat? They found that people who are severely insulin resistant, type 2 diabetics, they literally are never burning their own body fat during any sort of activity. And maybe at rest, they're burning a tiny bit. But once you get more of that adrenaline, it raises their blood sugar and they stop burning their body fat entirely.
And so how can sauna help? High intensity interval training? Can I kind of say I'm like, I'm going to stop eating seed oils today. Can I just like, how long would it take for me to like get that out? Can I accelerate that with like sauna, high intensity exercise, or is it just I'm kind of stuck for a little bit?
Well, the answer kind of depends on your health. And so, because if you're not burning your body fat, high intensity exercise is not going to help.
Sure.
Um, so what you need to do is burn your body fat.
Right.
And at the same time, your body fat is not being burnt by your cells right now for a reason. And that's because it's toxic to your cells. So that's where people who have, prediabetes and insulin resistance are literally stuck in a true trap. And the only way out of that is by balancing their meals to kind of ease that with the right balance of macronutrients to kind of ease them into burning their body fat. You got to reduce your carbs, but you got to have a certain amount of carbs. It's not easy. And so that's why I work with people and why I had to write a book, because this is a metabolic bind that doctors are unaware of. And I have not heard anybody else in the keto space talking about this particular metabolic bind, that you got to detox your body fat of these seed oils, but your body doesn't want to burn your body fat. And some people are metabolically damaged enough where it is actually dangerous to burn their body fat. So what do you do? And that's a big problem. And so that's why we need a kind of a very carefully constructed meal plan in order to help ease you out of that trap that you're in. It's a death trap.
Right. Now, what are some of the oils that are safe or things that are safe to cook in, right? You mentioned butter, you mentioned olive oil, specific types of olive oil, and what else maybe?
Yeah, so really anything that's not a seed oil is good to cook in, but it's never really good to deep fry. But if you have to deep fry, then you would want to use something like tallow, because
Okay.
it's very high in saturated fat. But like what I use most often is butter, because it's just delicious, and I use olive oil because I like Mediterranean sort of flavors, and it goes well with that. And then if I do anything Asian, I might use coconut or peanut, or with a little splash of sesame, just because it tastes so good. Those are my favorites. But I have that information on my website, which people can check out for free.
Excellent.
Yeah, so it's all over. It's like Dr. Cate list of good fats and bad, and you'll get it. It has
Love
all
it.
the like whys and wherefores and how I constructed it.
What are your thoughts on avocado oil?
It's fine. Yeah. Well, but
Right.
it has to be good. It has to be unrefined, so it's expensive. When it's refined, it's okay, but it's not very good.
Now, is that the same thing with olive oil? Because I know there's a million different olive oils now that are on the market, and so
Yeah.
same thing.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the more refined something is, the less healthy it could possibly be.
Got it.
Yeah.
You're making me think back to when I was a kid now, and I'm like, how much damage did I do when you go to the movie theater and they have like the fake butter that's all canola oil, and you like now you go to the movie theaters and you press the button and it just like pours into the bucket of popcorn, and I'm like, so many people do that. I see it when I'm at the movie theaters and people just load up. It's like an insane amount of canola oil all over their popcorn.
I know. And it tastes good because
Yeah.
it's laced with all kinds of chemicals, but it doesn't make you feel good.
Right.
That's what a lot of people notice when they go through like the process of I'm just going to try it for a week. And
Sure.
people will notice that their digestive system works better. That's one of the first things people notice. And they just feel like people just describe it as, I just feel less inflamed,
Sure.
whatever that means to a person. But it's accurate because they are less inflamed.
And one of the things that, and I don't know if this, I would love your insight on this. One of the easiest ways that I've kind of had my family start to transition is the sprays that they use on their pans. Like I feel like everyone knows Pam. Like everyone's typically using Pam. And even if you look on the back of a Pam, which I'm fascinated by, the serving size is like a half of a second, and no one's doing that. Like you're sitting there like, so you're doing 10, 15 servings. So while it may seem like 0 calories on the back, you're adding a substantial amount on top of it being a vegetable oil. So a lot of people, I think the easiest way maybe to get started is changing out your sprays, changing out the Pam for a better oil like an olive oil, or even just use some good old fashioned butter, or maybe even ghee instead.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And
Okay.
one of the things that I want to point out, just in case you have a lot of people who are keto diet enthusiasts who are
Sure.
listening, or low carb enthusiasts, is that I kind of came to understand this issue of the body fat because of the low carb flu, the keto
Mm,
flu.
yep.
A lot of people can kind of push through that, but a lot of people cannot.
Mm,
And as a medical doctor, um, I have to help those people as well, right? Like I can't just say, keto diet or die, right?
right, right, right.
So that's where I started thinking, like, why don't they? And that's where I started questioning what's going on with the body fat. And so then now I've taken those same people who were unable to do a keto diet, and I've gotten them to ultimately eventually be able to be able to do one if they wanted to. But I've gotten them to accomplish the same things without going so carb strict,
Hmm.
because you actually really don't get so many benefits from a keto diet from the ketones. You get the benefits because you're not poisoning your body by burning toxic polyunsaturated fatty acids, by forcing your mitochondria to do that. Like, that's not what they're meant to burn. That will make them shoot out free radicals and cause oxidative stress.
Right.
So, all the benefits that we think are coming from the keto diet, well, actually, when you look at it, when you look at the studies, there's many studies on low carb diets and keto diets now. There's been at least 17 for diabetes alone. They only show benefits when the keto diet specifically cuts down the PUFA, and by
Mm,
recommending things like cheese, an Atkins style keto diet versus a dietitian style keto diet. Those
right.
are two different
That's a
things.
great point. That's a great point. I want to ask you one more question, and then we'll dive into some quick raffle off some quick ones. You have been talking. I've seen some talks of yours where you're talking about seed oils and their relationship to COVID. What did you see? What are your thoughts on that, and what have you seen with that?
Yeah, so having consumed seed oils for so much of our lives, our bodies are a setup for not being able to deal well with additional stresses. And
Mm,
COVID, the worst versions of COVID that we started out with, um, really stirred up a lot of problems in people because, for one thing, they weren't eating. So they were releasing their body fat, which is
sure.
full of PUFA, which is toxic. And then because they were sick, it was activating inflammatory cascades that bring about more oxidative stress. And so all of this just is like a disaster for anyone with seed oils in their body fat. All these risk factors that, for bad COVID, they point to seed oils. The risk factors include hypertension, obesity, diabetes, fatty liver. That's the worst one. Seed oils cause fatty liver. All of those risk factors just for really bad COVID point to seed oils, and that's it. So that's the connection.
Got it. And you have on your website, you have a plethora of studies that you've kind of pulled out. Have you seen any that have done like a well controlled, randomized controlled trial, like matching identical diets and giving one group like a realistic dose of seed oil and giving another one olive oil and comparing everything apples to apples, or is that study still yet to be done?
Well, I wouldn't see olive oil, but I have seen it with lard,
Okay.
which is,
Yeah.
a traditional fat, right? So, and yeah, like it showed that it takes a while when
Hmm.
it's so they used corn oil and they used versus lard, and everything else was the same. This was inpatients in a mental hospital or like a prison hospital
Okay.
in the 50s and 60s. And it was a famous set of studies that was actually used to determine our vitamin E requirements. And they showed that uh, they were able to do the study for a long time. So it was a 13-year study. And they show that after a couple of years, that's when the differences really started to stand out. It became clear that their requirements for antioxidants were higher at that point. And then after an additional number of years, even the extra antioxidants didn't cut it anymore, and they were showing signs of serious oxidative stress.
Hmm.
That was at the 5-year point that started to happen. So, I mean, yes, there's a number of studies that were done in the 50s and 60s that were really well designed studies, and those do not make it into any of those meta-analyses, by the way.
Right.
When we're talking about how when you had your other hat on there, um, those studies don't get cited, and they are often bigger and better than better, well designed. They went on for longer. They included more people,
Right.
and they were doubly blinded and controlled. And other studies that they cite were not all those things.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's a shame that those aren't included, and people look past those, right? And I think there's still a lot more work to be done because I feel like you're shouting from the rooftops, and people are finally starting to recognize it. But I think we even need more support to kind of figure out how do we show this on an even broader scale, right? To make even bigger change than you're already making, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I say, I'm not at a university, so I can't publish in academic journals, and doctors aren't going to respect just a trade, hardback. Anybody can publish any kind of, they can make any case they want, it's not
Right.
peer reviewed. But, you know, who's the peer review, right? Who is it? Who's paying them?
Right. Well, maybe that's something we'll talk about after when we're offline because we publish all the time. We usually publish about 3 papers a month on various different topics.
Oh,
So we'll chat on maybe we can get
yeah, for
something going
sure.
here. That'd be fantastic. All right, I want to jump into before we jump into our final four, you brought up something that I wanted to mention. Is it smart while people are going through this early phase? Because I have a feeling when this podcast comes out, a lot of people are going to be like cutting the seed oils, removing them. You mentioned the antioxidant benefits. Is it beneficial during this kind of detox period from seed oils to ramp up your antioxidants, like start increasing blueberry consumption or some other consumption of high antioxidant foods?
Yes, I love this question because the answer uh, gets me to like one of my favorite topics, which is most of these antioxidant supplements are a complete waste of money.
Right.
Antioxidants don't work like that. Your body doesn't take these supposed antioxidants in blueberries and do diddly squat with them. Your
Mm.
liver has to process them and get rid of them. They can do some good if you're cooking, and they can prevent some oxidation that might be occurring in a frying pan. They can probably prevent some oxidation in your stomach. But antioxidants do not work the way the supplement companies tell you that they work. That is complete chemical BS. Any chemist will tell you this. Anybody who studies biochemistry, I mean, who is a chemist who studies oxidation science, they'll tell you that anything that is an antioxidant can act as a pro-oxidant. Our
Right.
bodies do not rely on random things coming in from our diet. They have enzymes, and these enzymes have been developed since the great oxygen crisis 2.5 billion years ago, when a bunch of bacteria started making oxygen. So enzymes is, you can't supplement into healthy enzymes. You can eat a healthy diet and fortify your diet so that your body can start making more of these enzymes. And there's a bunch of cofactors that you can supplement with, which are mostly just your basic vitamins and minerals.
Hmm.
So beyond basic vitamins and minerals, I see very little value for the vast majority of supplements.
So you think best way to increase antioxidant status is going to be decrease vegetable oil consumption and then make sure you're getting daily vitamins and minerals and allow your body to kind of ramp that up to the best of its ability.
Yeah, and a healthy, balanced diet,
Right,
right?
right.
Like you want to have plenty of protein. You want to do some of the stuff that I talk about in my other book, Deep Nutrition, where I talk about like the 4 principles of a traditional diet, and one of them is consuming, for example, bone broth. Another one is fermented foods. So I don't know.
That's incredible. Super, super important. I want to be cognizant of your time, and I want to jump into what I call our final 4 and learn a little bit more about you. What's your favorite meal?
This week, um, this week it might just be this chicken liver I got. I mean, this is going to sound gross,
Okay.
but a chicken liver that's really dark from a farm somewhere in the Midwest where they're super like nerdy about their soil.
Mm,
And then I coat it in a thick coat of flour so it can absorb a lot of butter. And then I put it in a lot of butter in a frying pan and cook it up. It's done in 5 minutes, lots of salt. It's really good. It's like a pancake with a
that's
slight savory flavor.
that sounds it. So normal flour, or what do you use as your
Yeah, I
flour?
just use regular flour. Yeah.
And then organ. Do you typically eat a lot of organ meats? Yeah.
Um, I didn't used to, but now that
Mhm.
I've just been exploring more, I've eaten a lot of different things lately.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What's your favorite book of all time, or something you're currently reading that's had a big impact on you?
Oh gosh. So I'm trying to, there's a battle right now between nutrition and physical degeneration
Mm.
and a revolution in eating. So have you talked about nutrition and physical degeneration? Because if you have, I'll talk about the other one.
No, whatever. You talk about it. Go ahead.
Have you heard of it?
No, I
Oh
haven't.
my gosh,
I
it'll blow
haven't.
your mind if you read it. So Nutrition and Physical Degeneration is this book written in the 1930s by this dentist named Weston Price. Maybe you've heard that name.
Yes, I have heard of it, but I haven't read the book.
Yeah, so it was his book that kind of inspired
Hmm.
me in a lot of ways to write certain chapters that I wrote in my book Deep Nutrition, where I'm talking about physical beauty, and like the principle of geometry that organizes the entire universe. So, like that, his book kind of blew my mind, and so yeah, it will blow your mind. Nutrition and Physical Degeneration.
I'll have to check that out. That's fantastic. Third question is, what are you most excited about in your life right now?
I guess the idea of getting done with this manuscript that I've been working on for a year and being able to move on to something that actually like builds my career. Because like writing books is an exercise in being antisocial, and I've
Mm.
been writing too many books, and I haven't really built my career. Like I just barely have a website that has barely any advertisement for my medical services, and I'm a medical doctor.
Right.
So I I want to do more of that. I have to stop writing books. But
I
I'm very excited about this next book because it hopefully will kind of blow up the whole seed oil thing to the next
Mm.
level, whatever that's.
Is that the main theme of this new book? Is kind of talking about seed oils?
Yes,
Oh, and
it's yeah.
what's estimated dates on that?
Well, hopefully it'll be out like within a year. I'm
Okay.
still working on the manuscripts, and then things take a while. So
We will stay
2024.
tuned for 2024.
Yeah.
All right, and then I think we kind of got a good answer already of this one. But what's one thing people can do today to improve their health?
Yeah, so I'll specify that one. If you make a habit of picking up everything that has an ingredients list and turning it around and looking for those 3 C's and 3 S's, that will change your life in a positive way.
I love that. And then last thing is, where can people find out more about you, your work? Are you on social media, your website, and books? Where can they find all of that?
Yeah, so my website is drcate.com, drcate.com. And that is kind of like the nexus for my books and a lot of great information of resources of stuff we've been talking about that's totally free. And also I have my socials on there, but I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. But I haven't done a lot lately because I've been writing this book.
Yeah, you're deep into the book. Well, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dr. K. This was a huge enlightenment. I think so many people are going to get a lot of benefit from this podcast, and I appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Ryan. It was great chatting with you.